Hello and welcome to another Commonwealth Conversation. We Virginians is back. We're talking about airports today. I am Ryan Gilchrist. Joining us today is Michael Giardino. He is the Executive Director of the Newport News Williamsburg International Airport. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Good to be with you.
And as always, my co-host is with us. She is the Executive in Residence at Hampton University and a former newspaper editor and publisher, Marisa Porto. Marisa, hello.
Hello, nice to see you all.
Obviously, we have lots of questions about what's going on with the aviation industry, with commercial air travel, especially those of us who had flights planned sometime in the near future. Marisa, what would you like to know from Michael today?
Well, I think we'll start out with, what's it like to be a traveler today in Virginia who's going out through any number of the airports here?
Well, thanks again for having me, and Marisa, that's a great question. What's it like? I think it's different for everybody. If you are a frequent traveler, maybe you've seen these things before, like masks that people would put on their face, maybe during another pandemic or epidemic. But for someone who hasn't traveled in quite some time, it could be something very strange because the airport's empty, number one. It's quiet. Sometimes the checkpoint is closed because it doesn't need to be open all the time. So you're actually coming into a building that is nearly vacant and experiencing things that aren't normal. It's not a bustling terminal building like you're used to. And then, of course, there are things like social distancing and other protocols that are taking place in the checkpoint. Checkpoint is scary enough for some people. You know, they don't like divesting of their personal items. Taking off your shoes, taking off clothing items can be weird. And then now all of a sudden we're trying to stay away from each other while we're trying to be close to one another. It's just not normal. And then you know, it's just the whole experience itself. There's no food concessions open at the moment. Boarding an aircraft is different. The aircraft is empty for the most part. It's just a different experience altogether. And we're not the only airport. It's happening everywhere. You can see the checkpoint numbers are down, 5% of travel from 2019 normally, and we've been down to 1% of travel on a day. One day here at the airport, we had 8 individuals getting on aircraft the entire day, 8 people.
So tell us what the airports and the airline folks around Virginia are talking about as they talk through what will happen when travelers do start to come back. Are there conversations that are being had right now around Virginia about what needs to be done and what that experience will look like when people start to travel again?
Well, again, we get back to the comfort factor and what we need to do to ensure that the new protocol, whatever that is, whether it be distancing or spacing or handling of things. I can guarantee you everybody talks about cleanliness. We talk about cleanliness all the time in airports. So it's something that we would concentrate on day in and day out. But it's technically the experience itself. We're talking about touchless. That's a new word for me. It's not a new concept. We have touchless dispensers for paper towels when you wash your hands. We have touchless when you get water to wash your hands and soap. So we're just looking into more touchless things so that people, again, can't spread anything if they happen to go to their face or whatnot. But what can we do to make the experience for the passenger as seamless? Just like when 9/11 happened and we all of a sudden had to go through a TSA checkpoint, which we never did. The FAA did the screenings, and the concern back then was terrorism of bringing a weapon on board, and that was completely different. Then we get into the TSA model, and things changed, and we're looking for other things, not just a weapon in somebody's pocket or something. And that whole experience changed the world, but we adapted to it, and it's normal at this point. So we're going to find ways to get people to feel comfortable in the building just as we would at any time. Because again, people get anxious enough just getting on an airplane nowadays. And We're just trying to figure out ways to make it, less anxious.
Michael, I know you spend a lot of time talking to other executive directors at small airports around the country. It can be difficult as a small airport in terms of staffing, knowing how to spin everything back up as people start to come back. What sort of approach do you see yourself and peers around the country taking to try to prepare for this reopening, if there's a better word for it, I don't know, where air travel does come back and it's a little unpredictable how quickly it's going to come back. How are you dealing with that with staffing issues, and how are others approaching it?
Well, I know you want to ask about the CARES Act, but we talked about it a little bit, where the CARES Act had a provision in there for large, medium, and small hub airports to retain 90% of staff. We're a non-hub airport, which means we're just smaller than a small hub, and that has to do with percentages of travelers in the nation and how we're categorized for funding for capital improvement projects. But we are categorized. There's 30 large hubs or so, and then there's about 60 medium hubs, and then small hubs behind them, and we're a non-hub. Well, non-hubs weren't mandated to retain 90% of their staff to receive CARES Act funding. So unfortunately, we, as a cost-cutting measure, had to lay off people, and that is very sad. And these are very qualified people and very essential when we're busy. But as I said, with 1% of the traffic, it didn't make sense to retain the staff. And as I've said before, I'm running a much different airport than I did in the beginning of March, let's say. It's a much different airport. We'll be lucky to get back to 50% of our traffic from 2019 in this calendar year. So everyone did what they had to do. We obviously weren't parking people as much as we were, so we stopped shuttling people from the parking lot. That's socially distanced in itself. We allowed people to park close to the building. We charge the same amount for parking in any space now. If you park in the garage, it's the same as if you were parking out in our long-term lot. So we reduced our rates. So we tried to minimize the staffing requirement, for the traffic that we had. Most of it was part-time folks that eventually, as we pick up, we'll be able to bring back, and we'll be grateful to have them back. And it's the same for every airport. They're all thinking about staffing and how to get it back and how to phase it back to do it proportionally. But again, the CARES Act mandated that some of those airports had to maintain 90% staffing. And I can tell you, we were, for April alone, we're about $400,000 in the red. And I can't sustain that. I cannot sustain losing $400,000, even with federal money or help. $400,000 a month is, again, unsustainable for the future. So we had to draw back. But we can just as easily ramp up when the public's ready to fly.
So is this similar across the United States and smaller airports facing the same problems that you're facing?
I would say yes. I don't know for sure. I haven't exactly talked to anybody. Each airport runs differently. We have a saying in the airport world: you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. We have the same rules, regulations, and everything else, but based on your governance structure and how you do things, everything's different. So our ability to retain staff, I'm happy to announce that we retained 84% of the full-time staff, which I think is a very good number. These are skilled, good paying positions. But unfortunately, for the 16% that aren't here, that's not a good number. And of course, the part-time staff, quite a bit of them were laid off. But again, hopefully we can bring people back when all of this is over.
So if the airport's losing $400,000 a month, and you're not expecting to get more than 50% of your travelers back before the end of the year, what's the plan?
It's a great question. So I gave that to my board just 2 weeks ago. We had a Peninsula Airport Commission via this kind of medium. We did it on another platform. And I presented the case studies of 9/11, because early on in this, I had my analysts take a look at 9/11 recovery and also the recession of 2008, 2009, and what kind of recovery trajectory there was. 9/11 took 30 months for the entire industry to get back to 100% normal. So almost 3 years. And then the recession, when you add in the consolidation of airlines that took place in that time frame, to include this airport when Southwest acquired AirTran, it took 86 months to recover from the recession. Now, since then, in 2015, let's say, there's been double-digit growth in the airline industry, and everybody was going gangbusters when this happened. So the decline for this was much steeper. So we got to dig out of a deeper hole. It impacted the entire economy, not just air travel. So we expect it to be a long climb up. So what did we do? Well, again, we reduced staff. We cut back where we could. In consumable items, we scaled back, some maintenance projects maybe, and also utilities. We're looking at other measures, like if we don't have as much activity in the building, maybe our insurance costs are lower. We're looking at things like that. And, so just cost cutting wherever we could. Luckily, I'd been through the drill in my Navy career many, many times, 26 years in the Navy.
Sure.
I can't tell you how many times the federal budget would go up and down over the years. So I'm used to this kind of drill. I was a village treasurer before I took airport jobs. So I understand the finance piece of it and what we have to do. So we're just taking it day by day. And I presented a budget to the commission based upon the analysis from 9/11 and the recession and what we think is a realistic future for us for the next fiscal year. And it's a balanced budget. I'm proud to say it doesn't burn that CARES Act money as quickly as we would. It's not $400,000 a month. It might be $50,000 a month in losses at first. And then hopefully by the end of the fiscal year, we're actually in the black a little bit. But it is a much reduced budget. We went from almost a $9 million budget to about $5.5 million total budget. But it's based on activity and the revenues that we can bring in from parking, our concessionaires at the rental cars, and of course the airlines are number one.
So I'm assuming that other airports around Virginia are having the same conversations that you're having about budgets and when the traveling public will get back to what it was last year at this time, and how long that will take. What does that look like in Virginia? Is Virginia going to see maybe some consolidation of airports or joining of forces, partnerships of some sort to help areas get through this difficult time?
I know there's been talk about it. Now, I've lived in Hampton Roads since the late 80s. So I know of talk about airport successes and airports, having traffic and not, and the challenge of the bridge tunnels and such, as well as throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, you've got Lynchburg and Roanoke and Charlottesville. Richmond is bigger than ever. Shenandoah Valley finally has commercial air service. And of course, you got the bigs. You've got Reagan and Dulles. So, we've got 9 commercial service airports. I think each one of them has opportunities and a need. I know they've talked for years about consolidating Newport News and Norfolk, for example, in another location. And there's talk about that all over the country. I mean, it happens all over the country. It happened at my last airport, as a matter of fact. We all have a need. There's a need and a demand. I leak 2,400 passengers daily each way. So I know that for a fact. If I had the service and the price was right, I could capture 2,400 more people on top of the original 600 to 700 daily that we had. So we know for a fact that we could support about 3,000 passengers. And I think in the AirTran days, they did. So, there's demand all over the place. What it's going to look like, it's going to take years to get back, like we've said earlier. But I think everybody has an opportunity here. What it What it does do, though, it may break the mold of the old hub and spoke system and the regional jet service. I mean, newcomers like Allegiant and Spirit and Frontier are proving point to point really works. It worked in the past. It could work in the future. I think, around the mid 1990s and maybe mid 2000s, the whole de-hubbing of places like Raleigh and Memphis and a few other places around the country. Cincinnati was an example when United and Continental merged. De-hubbing of those airports, there was a demand at one time. So maybe there's going to be a re-hubbing of areas, and who's to say that we're not going to be it? This airport was a near hub for AirTran at one time. And with a metropolitan statistical area of 1.7 million people, Hampton Roads could support 2 airports, no doubt. So I think the model might be broken a little bit. I think you've got some upstarts like Spirit and Allegiant and Frontier that might challenge the bigs. The bigs have been hit hard. Delta and American and United, all you got to do is look at their stock prices right now. They're bleeding cash. So, and Southwest, it's already said they're going to be a much different airline on the other end of this than they were. I think there's opportunity for Virginia airports. I really, really do think everybody needs to be patient. Think about hard where people in their area go, market those opportunities. I know for a fact that we're a business airport. I know for years it had been marketed as a leisure airport, but we're not. We're a business airport. We have 2 military bases, or actually more than that, three to 4 military bases to support. We've got federal travel. We've got great companies all over the peninsula, and we've got customers who would drive from the south side or further up the peninsula to this airport if given the opportunity with service.
So are we to expect consolidation in the airlines as well after we're on the tail end of this? Whatever that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. There's just like with a restaurant or a movie theater or other, there's going to be people that were just living on the margins, and it's going to be tough to survive. And finding a partner or two is going to be the only way to survive. And it worked last time. I mean, when airlines consolidated, the bigs consolidated from 8 down to 4. I mean, they were making money hand over fist until this happened. The profits had been unprecedented, let's say since 2015 to now. Airline profits have been outrageous. I mean, and the stock prices went way up. Nobody expected this to happen though. So, they're adaptable. They've learned their lessons, the airlines, and some are going to be hurt for sure.
What does international travel look like? I mean, before this happened, I think I was telling you earlier that, I had a ticket to go visit Paris, and, now that money is sitting in some fund somewhere for the next time I get to use it. What does international travel look like for Americans? What does it look like for folks coming to the United States? Are we looking at, getting temperatures taken before you get on the airplane? Are we looking at biometrics? What does that look like?
Well, I think the last 2 things that you said bring up a couple good points, but I'll address those after I say it's going to look exactly the way it is here. It looks exactly the way it is here. I mean, I just read an international report. It's about the same, 5% travel throughout. Now, there might be some unique circumstances depending on country, locality, and our model's different, right? We're private industry. Some airlines are government run, and it's a completely different model, on other continents. But for the most part, in the world that we travel in, it's about the same as here. But I think people are normally used to this kind of thing happening. I hate to say normal, because nothing is really normal about this, but people do wear masks. The protocols are a little bit differently. We could talk about the passenger experience in the airplane might be a little bit different. I don't know. Just like stadiums, are we going to fill airplanes to capacity anymore? Are the seats going to be different? Is there going to be a physical barrier between us? You know, I don't know any of those things. I do know that they're requiring people to wear masks. I don't know how people are drinking on board. I don't know how people are munching on peanuts and such on board, if they'll even be available anymore, because how can you not go to your mouth with your fingers if you're eating peanuts? That's just, it's just going to happen. So it's about the same experience. I think it'll open up as we open up. I think people will follow the normal protocols. You're going to see people with more masks and things like that. And I think you'll see that kind of stuff being sold at the stores a lot more in the airports, and how to do that. The virtual technology's there. And I mean, we did it in my former airport in Rochester with facial recognition as much as possible, and other places are doing that. And it was brought up I was on a call with Senator Wicker from the Commerce Committee, the Senate Chair of the Commerce Committee yesterday, and he was asking about those touchless and technologies and different virtual technologies. And I guess Atlanta, Hartsfield, the international concourse, you know, most of it is done via facial recognition. So we're not handing a passport, we're not touching items, we're not physically exchanging things. You walk up to a kiosk and it takes a picture of your face, or it scans your face and it knows who you are. So that stuff's just, it's out there. It costs money. I'm hoping to probably prototype or install more of that here, so that people, again, have that touchless experience and actually, you know, again, feel comfortable about their travel experience rather than anxious about it.
Can I just ask one last question, and that is to tell us what travel looks like in 3 to 5 years. I mean, we remember after 9/11, sort of this chaotic period, and then very specific things happening in the process to use an airport and get on an airplane and fly from one place to the other. So 3 years from now, 5 years from now, how are we changing?
So a little bit about my background. I have a degree in meteorology and forecast weather. I love it. Absolutely loved it as a student. Never did it professionally, you know, became a naval aviator and so on and so forth. But, and then, you know, live a life and experience a lot of things. You can't predict the last storm. You know, you can't go by your experience. If one hurricane dumped a lot of rain on you, the next one's going to get you with wind, etc. You know, so we try to predict, we try to analyze. Who knew 9/11 was going to happen? Who knew this was going to happen? I mean, everything was going gangbusters. And then who knew airline consolidation was going to happen? Take a look at this airport, for example. I mean, it was going gangbusters. And then all of a sudden, Southwest acquired AirTran, and 60% of the traffic went out the door and never came back. So what does it look like 3 to 5 years from now? It's anybody's guess. I do know this: people love to travel and they want to go, and we've recovered from stuff like this. We've recovered from 9/11 just fine. We recovered from the recession just fine. Before 9/11, the early 90s was, I think there were more airlines and more travel than ever at that time. There were just airlines all over the place. And like I said, before dehubbing, everybody wanted to go everywhere. We can get back there. And, you know, we have an urge to travel. We have a need to travel. As much as this technology works for us right now, I think people still like to meet in person. And of course, they love to go on vacations and be with family. So we just have to be patient, know that it'll work, we'll figure it out. And places like our airport will be here when people are ready. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, it was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. I think you've given us an eye-opening conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael Giardino, Executive Director at Newport News Williamsburg International Airport. That airport currently with service on American and Delta. So we'll look forward to seeing air travel crank back up soon. Full disclosure, that is the airport around the corner from my house, and one that I use the most frequently. So, Michael, I hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to be with you both.
As always, Marisa, thank you for your time. And for those of you who watched, if you made it this far, surely you can spare us a like, and we'd really love it if you'd subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this has been We Virginians. Thank you very much.